I never thought a letter from the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety would send my neighborhood into complete chaos. But that's exactly what happened on a humid Tuesday morning in June. My name is Lucas Harrison, and I'm a 42-year-old geologist who'd been living in the Pleasant Valley Estates subdivision just outside Colorado Springs for the past 8 years. The house was modest, a 3-bedroom ranch style with beige siding and a lawn that I kept trimmed to exactly 3 inches because our HOA president, Brenda Cartwright, had written me up twice for letting it reach 3 1/4. That's the kind of neighborhood this was. The kind where 50-something women with too much time on their hands measured your grass with rulers and sent you passive-aggressive emails about the shade of your mailbox. But I didn't care much about any of that because I had a secret that had been buried in property records and mineral rights documents since before the subdivision was even built. You see, when Pleasant Valley Estates was developed in 2004, the original landowner, a cattle rancher named William Montgomery, had sold the surface rights to the development company, but retained the mineral rights for himself. Smart man. Those mineral rights eventually passed to his daughter, who sold them to a small investment group in 2015. And in 2018, looking for a side investment, I'd bought those mineral rights for $45,000. The investment group had done preliminary surveys that showed promising deposits of lithium and rare earth minerals beneath the property, but nothing had been developed. Lithium prices were decent back then, but not worth the trouble of extraction. Then, 2024 happened. Electric vehicle production exploded. Lithium prices went through the roof. And suddenly, my little investment was looking very interesting indeed. I'd spent the last 6 months working with a mining company called Apex Resource Solutions, going through the permitting process, environmental studies, and all the legal hoops you have to jump through when you want to start drilling. The plan was to establish vertical access shafts on my property at 447 Meadowbrook Lane, with horizontal drilling extending beneath the subdivision. My property sat at the eastern edge of Pleasant Valley Estates, which made it perfect. The richest deposits were directly under the center of the neighborhood, beneath the community center, the pool, and yes, beneath Brenda Cartwright's perfectly manicured corner lot at 205 Settlers Ridge Court. The drilling permit approval letter arrived on June 14th. I was drinking my morning coffee, still in my pajama pants, when I opened the envelope. My hands actually shook as I read it. Approved. Fully approved. Work could begin in 30 days. I called my contact at Apex immediately. "Jerry, it's Lucas. We got it." Jerry Chen, the project manager, whooped on the other end. "Seriously? They approved everything?" "Everything. Environmental impact assessment accepted, drilling plan approved, the works." "Lucas, do you understand what this means? Based on our latest surveys, we're looking at deposits worth potentially $20 to $30 million. Your royalty percentage is going to make you a very wealthy man." I did understand. My contract with Apex gave me a 20% royalty on all minerals extracted, plus a flat fee for the drilling access. Even conservative estimates put my take at $4 to $6 million over the next decade. "When do we break ground?" I asked. "I'll have crews out there in 3 weeks. We need to get equipment staged on your property. That's going to mean some heavy trucks, a temporary office trailer, and the drill rig itself. It's going to be visible, Lucas. Your neighbors are going to notice." "Let them notice," I said. "It's all legal. I own the mineral rights, the permits are approved, and my property has access to the county road. They can't stop us." I should have known better than to underestimate Brenda Cartwright. The equipment started arriving on July 5th, right after the Independence Day weekend. A crew from Apex showed up at 7 in the morning with survey equipment and started marking out the drill site in my backyard. By 9, Brenda was at my door. She didn't knock. She rang the doorbell 6 times in rapid succession, the way someone might ring if there was an emergency. I opened the door to find her standing there in white capri pants and a floral blouse, her highlighted blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her face already red with indignation. "What is going on here, Lucas?" she demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. "There are trucks and men with equipment all over your property. This is a residential neighborhood. You can't just decide to run some kind of construction operation without HOA approval." I leaned against the doorframe. Good morning, Brenda. Actually, I can. This is a mineral extraction operation, and it's covered under my mineral rights, which supersede HOA regulations. Her eyes narrowed. Mineral rights? What are you talking about? I own the mineral rights beneath this subdivision. I've secured the necessary permits from the state, and we're beginning drilling operations. Everything is completely legal and above board. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's impossible. The HOA owns this land. The HOA owns the surface rights and common areas. I own the subsurface mineral rights, two completely different things. You can't do this, she sputtered. I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting. This is absolutely unacceptable. Call whatever meetings you want, I said calmly. Won't change anything. Have a nice day, Brenda. I closed the door on her shocked face. Through the window, I watched her stomp back to her car, already pulling out her phone. I knew exactly who she was calling. The other board members, probably the HOA's attorney, and definitely every gossip in the neighborhood who would listen. By that afternoon, my phone was blowing up. Emails from the HOA board, text messages from neighbors I barely knew. Someone even posted about it in the neighborhood Facebook group, which I'd muted years ago but apparently was now having a meltdown over the industrial operation being conducted at 447 Meadowbrook Lane. Jerry arrived around 3 with 2 engineers and a site supervisor. We walked the property, discussing placement for the drill rig, the temporary office, and the access road that would need to be reinforced for heavy equipment. You've got angry neighbors already, Jerry observed, noting the small crowd that had gathered across the street pretending to chat but obviously watching us. Just wait, I said. This is only the beginning. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for July 8th at 7 p.m. in the community center. I wasn't required to attend, but I decided to go anyway. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they had no power to stop this. I arrived at 6:55 with a folder full of documents, my mineral rights deed, the drilling permits, the environmental assessment, and a letter from my attorney outlining exactly why the HOA had no jurisdiction over subsurface mineral extraction. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls. I recognized most of my neighbors, many of whom I'd only exchanged waves with over the years. Brenda sat at the head table with the other 4 board members, Keith Morrison, a retired insurance salesman who always wore polo shirts, Patricia Fleming, a real estate agent with too much jewelry, David Russo, who owned a local car dealership, and Margaret Chen, a librarian who was usually the only reasonable person on the board. Brenda banged a gavel that she'd probably bought specifically for this meeting. This emergency session is now called to order. We're here to address the unauthorized industrial activity being conducted by Lucas Harrison at 447 Meadowbrook Lane. It's not unauthorized, I called out from my seat in the 3rd row. I have all the necessary permits from the state and county. Brenda's face flushed. You did not get HOA approval, which is required under our covenants, conditions, and restrictions for any major property modifications. I stood up, holding my folder. Mind if I address the board? This isn't a public comment period, Brenda snapped. Margaret spoke up. Oh, let him speak, Brenda. We need to hear what's actually going on. Brenda looked like she wanted to argue but nodded tightly. Fine. You have 5 minutes. I walked to the front, turning to face the crowd of neighbors. Here's the situation, as simply as I can explain it. In 2018, I purchased the mineral rights to the land beneath this entire subdivision. Those rights were never owned by the HOA or the development company. They were retained by the original landowner and eventually sold separately. Mineral rights are subsurface property rights, and they're completely separate from surface property rights. A man in the back shouted, "What does that mean?" It means I own everything below the surface of this subdivision. The HOA owns the surface land for common areas, and each of you owns the surface land for your individual lots. But I own what's underneath. And underneath us, there are valuable deposits of lithium and rare earth minerals. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly. "This is ridiculous," Keith Morrison said when the noise died down. "You can't just claim to own what's under our homes." "I'm not claiming it. I do own it. Here's the deed." I pulled out the document and held it up. Recorded with El Paso County in 2018. Completely legal and legitimate. Patricia Fleming adjusted her necklaces nervously. But what are you planning to do? I've partnered with Apex Resource Solutions to extract those minerals. We've received all necessary permits from the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety. We'll be drilling from my property with horizontal extraction extending beneath the subdivision. The operation will be conducted according to all state and federal environmental regulations. How long will this take? Someone asked. Initial drilling will take about 2 months. Full extraction operations could continue for 8 to 10 years. The room exploded again. Brenda was screaming for order, but nobody was listening. People were yelling about property values, about safety, about whether their houses would collapse. It was chaos. Finally, Brenda got everyone quiet again. This is unacceptable, Lucas. The HOA will be filing an injunction to stop this immediately. You can try, I said calmly, but you'll lose. I've already had 3 attorneys review this. Mineral rights supersede surface rights under Colorado law. The HOA has no legal standing to prevent mineral extraction. We'll see about that, Brenda hissed. This meeting is adjourned. The board will be consulting with our attorney immediately. I went home, ate a late dinner, and went to bed. I knew the legal battle was coming, but I wasn't worried. The law was on my side. The next morning, I found my mailbox had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Traitor" across it in red letters. I took pictures and filed a police report, then called Jerry to let him know things were escalating. Should we be concerned? Jerry asked. Probably just angry neighbors blowing off steam, I said, but let's make sure the site has security cameras installed before the equipment arrives. The drilling rig showed up on July 12th. It was massive, a towering structure that had to be assembled piece by piece in my backyard. The crew worked for 3 days straight, and the rig rose higher and higher, visible from every house in the subdivision. It was impossible to ignore. On July 15th, I received a cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney, Gerald McKenzie. It was full of legal language, but essentially argued that my drilling operation constituted a nuisance, violated neighborhood aesthetic standards, and posed a safety risk to residents. It demanded I stop all operations immediately. My attorney, Tom Bradshaw, laughed when he read it. This is garbage. They're grasping at straws. Send me everything you have on the permits and I'll draft a response. Tom's response was delivered 2 days later. It methodically destroyed every argument the HOA had made, cited relevant case law on mineral rights in Colorado, and included copies of all approved permits. It concluded by noting that any further attempts to interfere with legal mining operations could result in a countersuit for tortious interference. That should have been the end of it. But Brenda Cartwright wasn't the type to give up. On July 20th, the county inspector showed up for a surprise inspection. Jerry called me immediately. Lucas, we've got a county inspector here. Says there was a complaint about unsafe operations. I drove over from my office downtown, arriving to find a tired-looking inspector in a hard hat examining the drill rig. Jerry looked irritated but professional, showing the inspector all the safety certifications and permits. Everything looks in order, the inspector said, making notes on his tablet. Who filed the complaint? I'd like to know that too, I said. The inspector checked his tablet. A Brenda Cartwright, president of the local HOA. Of course it was. Is this going to be a regular thing? Jerry asked. The inspector shrugged. If complaints keep coming in, we have to investigate. But if everything continues to check out, the complaints will go on record as unfounded. After 3 or 4 unfounded complaints, we usually stop responding unless there's evidence of an actual problem. Over the next 2 weeks, the county received 4 more complaints from Brenda. The inspector stopped coming after the second one, simply calling Jerry to confirm nothing had changed and filing the complaints as harassment. Drilling began on August 3rd. The rig roared to life at 8 a.m., and the noise was significant. Not deafening, but definitely noticeable throughout the neighborhood. We were operating within all legal noise ordinances, stopping work at 6 p.m. and not operating on Sundays. But that didn't stop the complaints. My email inbox was flooded. People accused me of ruining the neighborhood, of destroying property values, of not caring about my neighbors. Someone left a nasty note on my windshield. The neighborhood Facebook group, which I finally looked at out of morbid curiosity, was calling me everything from a corporate sellout to a traitor to the community. But there were also neighbors who were curious rather than angry. My next-door neighbor, Ray Thompson, came over one evening with a six-pack of beer. "Mind if I ask you something?" Ray said as we sat on my porch. Sure. How much is this worth, realistically? I hesitated, then figured honesty was the best policy with Ray. Based on current assessments, my take over the next decade could be anywhere from $4 to $7 million. Ray whistled low. Damn, no wonder you're willing to put up with Brenda's crap. It's not just the money, I said, though that obviously helps. It's the principle. I invested in those mineral rights years ago, did my research, took a risk. This is a legitimate business operation, and I have every legal right to do it. I get it, Ray said. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is smart. Brenda's just mad because she can't control you. That was probably true. Brenda Cartwright had run Pleasant Valley Estates like her personal fiefdom for 6 years. She couldn't stand that someone was doing something she couldn't regulate or stop. On August 10th, things took a darker turn. I came home from work to find that someone had tried to cut the lock on the gate to the drilling site. The security cameras Jerry had installed caught 3 figures in dark clothing and hoodies at 2 a.m. The image quality wasn't good enough to identify faces. I filed another police report. The officer who responded, a young guy named Officer Martinez, took it seriously this time. "Mr. Harrison, we've been getting reports about tension in this neighborhood. You might want to consider increasing security." "I'm drilling for minerals, not running a meth lab," I said. "Why am I the one who needs security?" "Because you're doing something your neighbors don't like and people get stupid when they're angry. Just a suggestion." I took his advice. Apex installed better lighting, upgraded the cameras to high definition, and hired a night security guard. The guard's name was Dennis, a retired police officer who was happy to have the easy gig. The drilling went deeper. By late August, we'd reached the lithium deposits. The initial core samples were even better than expected. Jerry was ecstatic. "Lucas, this is incredible. The concentration is about 15% higher than our estimates. We're looking at significantly higher yields." "Which means what in practical terms?" "Which means your royalty payments are going to be substantially larger than we projected. We might be talking about 8 to 10 million over the life of the extraction, possibly more." I sat down heavily in the temporary office. $10 million. That was generational wealth. That was retire at 45 money. That was everything I'd hoped for when I made that investment. But it also meant the stakes were higher, and Brenda Cartwright was about to find out. I'm not sure how she learned about the increased value of the deposits, but she did. Maybe she knew someone at the county who saw the updated reports. Maybe someone from Apex talked too much at a bar. Either way, by early September, she knew. The HOA called another emergency meeting on September 8th. This time, I received a formal invitation requesting my attendance. The tone was different, less hostile, more conciliatory. I was suspicious immediately. I showed up with Tom Bradshaw, my attorney. The community center was packed again, but the energy was different, less angry, more anxious. Brenda sat at the head table with the rest of the board, but this time she was smiling. That was a bad sign. "Thank you for coming, Lucas," Brenda said in a syrupy voice that made my skin crawl. "We wanted to discuss a potential resolution to the current situation that might benefit everyone." "I'm listening," I said carefully. Keith Morrison cleared his throat. "We've done some research into mineral rights and extraction operations. We understand that you have the legal right to conduct this drilling. However, we believe that the HOA and the residents of Pleasant Valley Estates should be compensated for the disruption and potential impact to property values." "Compensated?" I repeated flatly. "Yes," Brenda said, still smiling. "We've consulted with a mining industry expert who advised us that it's common practice for mineral rights holders to negotiate community benefit agreements. We're proposing that you establish a fund to compensate the HOA and residents. We think $10 million would be appropriate, distributed over the life of the operation." I actually laughed. "I couldn't help it. You want me to give you $10 million? "It's only fair," Patricia Fleming said. "This is our community, too. We shouldn't have to suffer while you profit." Tom Bradshaw leaned forward. "Ms. Cartwright, members of the board, let me be very clear. My client has no legal obligation to provide any compensation whatsoever. He owns the mineral rights. He has all necessary permits. The HOA has no claim to the minerals or to any proceeds from their extraction. But we could make things very difficult, Brenda said, her smile fading. There are many ways an HOA can complicate someone's life. Fines for property violations, liens, constant inspections, legal challenges. That would be extortion, Tom said coldly, and we'd have no problem demonstrating that in court. If the HOA begins targeting Mr. Harrison with spurious fines and violations in retaliation for his legal business operations, we'll file suit immediately. You could be held personally liable as board members for harassment and abuse of your positions. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Margaret Chen spoke up for the first time. I told you this was a bad idea, she said to Brenda. Shut up, Margaret, Brenda snapped, then caught herself. I mean, let's not get hasty. We're just trying to negotiate in good faith. No, you're trying to extort me, I said, standing up. Here's my counteroffer. Nothing. You get nothing. I'm going to continue my legal drilling operation, and the HOA is going to stay out of my way. If you try to interfere, if you fine me for fake violations, if you do anything to retaliate, I'll bury you in legal fees. Tom's firm has already agreed to work on contingency because they know we'll win. Can the HOA afford to spend $50,000 on attorney fees for a case you'll lose? The room was silent. Brenda's face had gone from red to pale. This meeting is over, I said, and walked out with Tom following behind. In the parking lot, Tom patted me on the shoulder. Well handled. They were testing you to see if you'd cave. Now they know you won't. What do you think they'll do? Honestly? Probably nothing. They know they don't have a leg to stand on, but keep documenting everything, just in case. I should have known Brenda wouldn't give up that easily. The harassment started small. I got a citation for having my trash cans visible from the street at 10 a.m. on a non-collection day. Never mind that I'd been at work and the trash collectors had left them there. I got a warning about the color of my front door being non-compliant with community standards, even though the door had been that color for 8 years. I got a notice that my lawn was dangerously overgrown when it was exactly 3 inches, the same as always. I documented everything and forwarded it to Tom. Each violation was petty, laughable, but they added up. The fines totaled almost $2,000. Tom sent a letter to the HOA board on September 22nd. It was polite but firm, noting the pattern of retaliation and warning that continued harassment would result in legal action. He attached documentation showing that each cited violation was either non-existent or had been selectively enforced against me while identical situations at other properties were ignored. The citations stopped after that. But Brenda wasn't done. On October 3rd, I received a notice that the HOA had filed a lawsuit against me in El Paso County District Court. The complaint alleged that my drilling operation constituted a private nuisance, demanded an injunction stopping all work, and sought damages for diminished property values throughout the subdivision. Tom read the complaint and shook his head. This is a nuisance suit in every sense of the word. They're not going to win, but they're hoping to tie you up in court and make the operation too expensive to continue. How much is this going to cost me? To defend? Probably $20,000 to $30,000 if it goes to trial, but I think we can get it dismissed on summary judgment long before that. The law is very clear on this. Tom filed a motion to dismiss in early October. The hearing was scheduled for November 5th. In the meantime, drilling continued. We'd started horizontal drilling beneath the subdivision, and the operation was going smoothly. The equipment ran during business hours, we followed every regulation, and there had been no safety incidents or environmental violations. But the neighborhood was getting uglier. Someone started a petition to stop the mining operation, even though there was no legal mechanism to do so. Signs appeared in yards throughout the subdivision: "Save our community" and "Stop the drilling." My house was egged twice. Someone slashed one of the tires on the Apex Company truck. Dennis, the security guard, was earning his pay. He chased off trespassers several times, always calling me to report the incidents. On October 18th, he called at 2 a.m. "Lucas, you need to get down here. We've got a situation." I threw on clothes and drove to the site in under 5 minutes. When I arrived, I found Dennis restraining a man in his 30s who I vaguely recognized from the neighborhood. 2 police cars were already there, lights flashing. Officer Martinez was taking a statement from Dennis. "Mr. Harrison, this individual was attempting to sabotage the drilling equipment. We caught him with a wrench trying to damage the control panel." The man, whose name turned out to be Craig Whitmore, lived 3 streets over. He was drunk and belligerent, yelling about how I was destroying the neighborhood and ruining everyone's lives. "I'm pressing charges," I told Officer Martinez. "Craig was arrested for attempted vandalism and criminal mischief." The police report documented the incident thoroughly. As the police car drove away with Craig in the back, several neighbors who'd been woken by the commotion stood in their yards, watching. The next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group was in meltdown mode. Some people were defending Craig, saying he was just frustrated and had made a mistake. Others were condemning me, as if his attempted sabotage was somehow my fault. A few voices spoke up, saying this had gone too far, that what Craig did was illegal and wrong, but they were shouted down. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Tom. "This is getting out of hand," I wrote. Tom called me that afternoon. "Lucas, I think we need to consider filing a restraining order against Brenda Cartwright and possibly some of the other board members. This is creating a hostile environment that's escalating to violence." "Will that help?" "It will put them on notice that they're legally responsible for the climate they're creating. If they continue inciting people against you and someone gets hurt, they could face serious liability." We filed for a restraining order on October 21st. The petition outlined the pattern of harassment, the escalating hostility, Brenda's public statements encouraging opposition to the drilling, and the recent attempted sabotage. We asked for a temporary order preventing Brenda and the board members from coming within 100 yards of my property or the drilling site, and from making public statements encouraging illegal action. The hearing was scheduled for October 27th. Brenda showed up with Gerald McKenzie, the HOA's attorney. I was there with Tom. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Simmons, reviewed the petition carefully. "Mr. Bradshaw, you're alleging that Ms. Cartwright is responsible for creating a hostile environment that led to attempted sabotage?" Judge Simmons asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cartwright has conducted a sustained campaign of harassment against my client, including baseless citations, a frivolous lawsuit, and repeated public statements characterizing his legal business operation as an attack on the community. She's created an environment where individuals feel justified in taking illegal action." "Your Honor, that's absurd," Mackenzie argued. "Ms. Cartwright has simply been fulfilling her duties as HOA president. She has never encouraged illegal activity." Tom pulled out his phone and projected images on the screen we'd set up, screenshots from the neighborhood Facebook group. In one post, Brenda had written, "Lucas Harrison cares more about money than his neighbors. He's willing to destroy our community for profit. We need to show him that Pleasant Valley Estates won't tolerate this." In another, "Every legal option should be pursued to stop this drilling. Our community is under attack." These statements, combined with the HOA's pattern of retaliatory citations and the lawsuit specifically designed to burden my client financially, demonstrate a clear intent to harass and intimidate, Tom said. Judge Simmons studied the evidence. "Ms. Cartwright, do you deny making these statements?" Brenda shifted uncomfortably. "I was expressing my concerns as a community leader. I never told anyone to break the law. But you created an atmosphere where someone felt justified in attempting to sabotage Mr. Harrison's equipment," Judge Simmons said. "That's concerning. I'm granting a temporary restraining order. Ms. Cartwright, you and the other board members named in this petition are to maintain a distance of at least 100 yards from Mr. Harrison's property and the drilling site. You are prohibited from making public statements that could be interpreted as encouraging illegal interference with his operations. This order will remain in effect pending the outcome of the HOA's lawsuit. If that suit is dismissed, we'll revisit whether to make this permanent." Brenda looked like she'd been slapped. "Your Honor, I'm the HOA president. I have responsibilities. Then fulfill them without harassing Mr. Harrison. This order is effective immediately." We left the courthouse, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Tom was satisfied. "That should cool things down significantly." She can't incite people anymore without violating a court order. The summary judgment hearing for the HOA's lawsuit was held on November 5th, as scheduled. Judge Richard Connolly, a different judge from the restraining order hearing, presided. Tom had prepared a comprehensive brief demonstrating that Colorado law clearly established the primacy of mineral rights over surface rights, that I had all necessary permits, and that the HOA had no legal standing to challenge the operation. The hearing lasted less than an hour. The HOA's attorney tried to argue that the drilling constituted a nuisance, but Judge Connolly wasn't buying it. Mr. McKenzie, your client is essentially arguing that legal activity, properly permitted and conducted according to all regulations, somehow constitutes a nuisance simply because the neighbors don't like it. That's not how nuisance law works. A nuisance must be unreasonable. There's nothing unreasonable about exercising one's legal property rights. Your Honor, the impact on the community is irrelevant if the activity is legal. Mr. Harrison owns the mineral rights. He has the permits. He's following all regulations. The HOA has presented no evidence of actual harm, only speculation about property values and aesthetic concerns. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. It was over. The HOA had lost, and lost badly. The dismissal with prejudice meant they couldn't refile the same claim. Tom was grinning as we left the courtroom. That's it, Lucas. You won. They've got nothing left. I should have felt relieved, but I was tense. Cornered animals are dangerous, and Brenda Cartwright had just been thoroughly cornered. November passed relatively quietly. The restraining order and the dismissed lawsuit seemed to have taken the wind out of the opposition. The drilling continued without incident. We were extracting high-quality lithium ore, and Apex was thrilled with the results. Jerry reported that initial processing showed even higher purity than expected. You're looking at closer to $12 million over the life of this operation, Jerry told me in late November. Maybe more if lithium prices hold steady. $12 million. It was surreal, but I couldn't fully enjoy it because I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on December 2nd. I was at the drilling site, meeting with Jerry about the next phase of operations, when Dennis came running over. Lucas, you need to see this. Someone's here claiming we don't have permission to drill. I walked to the gate and found 3 people, a man in a suit, a woman with a clipboard, and a very nervous-looking young guy in his 20s. Can I help you? I asked. The man in the suit extended a hand. Robert Carmichael. I'm an attorney representing the estate of William Montgomery. This young man is Tyler Montgomery, William's grandson and current heir to the estate. I shook his hand warily. Okay, and? Mr. Montgomery has recently become aware that mineral rights to this property were sold without proper authorization from the estate. We're here to inform you that those rights were not legally conveyed, and any operations based on that conveyance are invalid. My stomach dropped. Excuse me? Tyler Montgomery looked miserable. I'm really sorry, man. I didn't even know about this until last week. But apparently my grandfather's will was contested after he died, and there's some question about whether his daughter had the authority to sell those mineral rights in 2015. I pulled out my phone and called Tom immediately. Tom, I've got a situation. I need you at the drilling site now. Tom arrived within 30 minutes, and we all convened in the temporary office. Robert Carmichael laid out his case. William Montgomery had died in 2013. His will had left everything to his daughter, Sarah, but there had been a dispute with William's sister over the estate. That dispute had been settled in 2016, but part of the settlement allegedly included provisions about mineral rights that Sarah had violated by selling them to the investment group. If the sale to the investment group was invalid, then the subsequent sale to Mr. Harrison was also invalid, Carmichael concluded. The mineral rights should have reverted to the estate, which is now controlled by Tyler Montgomery. Tom was reading through documents Carmichael had provided, his face grave. Lucas, I need to review this carefully. This could be a significant problem. Could be, I said, my voice rising. I invested $45,000 in those mineral rights. I've spent months and hundreds of thousands more getting permits and starting operations. If I don't actually own the rights, let's not panic, Tom said. I need to see the original will, the settlement agreement, and the title history. Mr. Carmichael, can you provide complete documentation? I can have everything to you by tomorrow. After they left, I sat in the office with my head in my hands. Jerry looked worried. What does this mean for the operation? It means we might have to shut down until this gets sorted out. If I don't actually own the mineral rights, we're drilling illegally. That night, I barely slept. Everything I'd worked for, all the harassment I'd endured, the fights with the HOA, all of it could be for nothing if those mineral rights weren't actually mine. Tom called me the next morning. Lucas, we need to talk. Can you come to my office? I drove downtown, my stomach churning. Tom's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building with a view of Pikes Peak. He had documents spread across his conference table. Okay, here's what I've figured out, Tom said. William Montgomery's will did leave everything to Sarah. The dispute with his sister was real, and they did settle in 2016. But the settlement didn't include any provisions about mineral rights. I've read it 3 times. There's nothing there. So what's Carmichael's argument? He's bluffing. I think Tyler Montgomery is being used. Someone put this idea in his head that he might have a claim to valuable mineral rights, and Carmichael smelled a big payday. Someone put this in his head, I repeated. Someone like Brenda Cartwright? Tom pulled up his laptop and showed me a screenshot. Margaret Chen, the board member who's been reasonable through all this, sent me this. It's from the neighborhood Facebook group, private message thread between Brenda and several other residents. They were actively looking for a way to stop you after the lawsuit failed. Someone found out that William Montgomery had a grandson and tracked him down. I read the messages. Brenda had written, if we can prove Lucas doesn't actually own the mineral rights, everything stops. We need to find the heirs and see if there's any way to challenge the sale. This is conspiracy, I said. They manufactured this claim. It's worse than that, Tom said. If Brenda and the others convinced Tyler Montgomery to file a fraudulent claim knowing it had no basis, that's barratry and possibly fraud. But we need to be careful. Tyler might be an innocent pawn here. We need to approach this strategically. Tom reached out to Robert Carmichael with our findings. He demanded to see any evidence supporting the claim that the 2015 sale was invalid. Carmichael waffled, saying he needed more time to review documents. That was a tell. He didn't have evidence because there wasn't any. On December 7th, Tom sent a formal demand letter to Carmichael. It outlined the clear chain of title for the mineral rights, provided documentation showing the settlement agreement contained no mineral rights provisions, and demanded withdrawal of the claim within 5 business days, or we'd file suit for frivolous litigation and conspiracy. Carmichael called Tom the next day. Look, I may have been hasty. My client is reconsidering his position. Your client was fed false information by third parties who have a financial interest in stopping my client's operations, Tom said. We know about Brenda Cartwright's involvement. If this goes any further, we're going to make it very public and very expensive for everyone involved. The claim was withdrawn on December 10th. Tyler Montgomery released a statement saying he'd been mistaken about his grandfather's estate and had no claim to the mineral rights. Carmichael quietly disappeared from the picture. But we weren't done with Brenda Cartwright. On December 15th, Tom and I met with the El Paso County District Attorney's Office. We presented evidence of Brenda's actions, the conspiracy to manufacture a false claim to the mineral rights, the pattern of harassment, the retaliatory citations, the statements that created an environment leading to attempted sabotage. The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Cordova, reviewed everything carefully. This is interesting. You're alleging a pattern of criminal conduct by an HOA board. We're alleging harassment, conspiracy to file false claims, and potentially inciting criminal activity, Tom said. Ms. Cartwright has conducted a months-long campaign to stop my client's legal business operations through any means necessary, including illegal means. The attempted sabotage resulted in criminal charges against Mr. Whitmore, Rachel noted. Did he say anything about why he did it? His attorney might have that information, I said, but the neighborhood context was clear. He'd been exposed to months of rhetoric about how I was destroying the community. Rachel thought for a moment. Let me talk to my boss and to Mr. Whitmore's attorney. If Whitmore is willing to cooperate and testify about what motivated him, we might have enough for charges of criminal solicitation or conspiracy. Give me a week. That was the longest week of my life. The drilling continued, but I was constantly looking over my shoulder. If criminal charges were filed against Brenda, the HOA board would likely collapse. But if they weren't, she'd still be there, still vindictive, still looking for ways to hurt me. On December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas, 2 police detectives arrived at Brenda Cartwright's house. They arrested her on charges of conspiracy to commit vandalism and criminal solicitation. The arrest was based on testimony from Craig Whitmore, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges on his attempted sabotage case. He told investigators that Brenda had approached him privately at a neighborhood gathering and said that someone needed to do something about the drilling, that legal methods had failed, and that maybe the equipment needed to accidentally break down. That was enough for the DA's office. Direct encouragement of criminal activity, even if somewhat vague, met the standard for criminal solicitation under Colorado law. Brenda's arrest made the local news. The story was delicious. HOA president arrested for trying to stop neighbor's legal business operation. The news crews descended on Pleasant Valley estates, interviewing anyone who would talk. Some neighbors defended Brenda, saying she was just trying to protect the community. Others were horrified, saying they'd had no idea things had gone so far. The other board members resigned immediately, wanting nothing to do with the scandal. Margaret Chen agreed to serve as temporary president to keep the HOA functioning, but made it clear she wanted nothing to do with opposing the drilling. Brenda's attorney tried to get the charges dismissed, but the evidence was solid. Craig Whitmore's testimony was detailed and credible. Text messages between Brenda and several neighbors showed her discussing direct action and making the drilling too expensive to continue. It wasn't enough to prove she'd specifically ordered the sabotage, but it was enough to show she'd created an environment encouraging it and had made statements that could reasonably be interpreted as soliciting illegal activity. The case went to trial in March. I testified about the months of harassment and the escalating hostility. Craig Whitmore testified about his conversation with Brenda. The prosecution presented the text messages and Facebook posts showing Brenda's campaign against me. Brenda took the stand in her own defense. She claimed she'd never encouraged illegal activity, that her statements had been taken out of context, that she was just trying to protect property values. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination, showing her the restraining order, the dismissed lawsuit, the pattern of retaliation. "Ms. Cartwright, when legal methods failed, you turned to illegal ones, didn't you?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I never. You told Mr. Whitmore that something needed to be done about the drilling equipment, didn't you?" "I was speaking generally. You created an environment where your neighbors felt justified in breaking the law to stop Mr. Harrison's legal business operation, didn't you?" "I was protecting the community." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Brenda guilty of criminal solicitation. The judge sentenced her to 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay restitution of $15,000 to cover my increased security costs and legal fees related to the sabotage attempt. She was also permanently barred from serving on the HOA board. It was April when everything finally settled down. The drilling operation was in full swing, extracting high-quality lithium ore that was processed at a facility in Pueblo. Apex was thrilled with the results. My first royalty check arrived in May, $375,000 for the first quarter of production. I deposited the check and sat in my car in the bank parking lot, just staring at my account balance. This was real. This was happening. The neighborhood gradually returned to normal. The signs came down from yards. The Facebook group drama died down. People stopped egging my house or leaving nasty notes. Some neighbors apologized for getting caught up in the hysteria. Others just quietly went back to ignoring me, which was fine. Ray Thompson came over one evening in late May with another six-pack. We sat on my porch, listening to the steady hum of the drilling equipment in the backyard. So, Ray said, what are you going to do with all that money? I'd been thinking about that a lot. First, I'm going to pay off my mortgage. Then I'm thinking about maybe starting a scholarship fund for geology students at Colorado State. After that, I don't know. Travel, maybe. Take it easy. You earned it, Ray said. You stood up to Brenda when everyone else was too scared. That took guts. I just exercised my legal rights. Yeah, but you did it when the whole neighborhood was against you? That's not easy. He was right. It hadn't been easy. There had been nights when I'd wondered if it was worth it, when the harassment and hostility had felt overwhelming. But I'd stuck to my principles. I'd owned something valuable. I'd followed every law and regulation, and I'd refused to be bullied into giving it up. The drilling operation continued through 2026 and into 2027. Property values in Pleasant Valley estates didn't collapse like everyone had feared. In fact, they increased slightly, possibly because the neighborhood had gotten attention and some people liked the novelty of living above an active mining operation. The equipment was well maintained and quiet, operating only during reasonable hours. There were no environmental incidents, no safety problems, no cave-ins or sinkholes, or any of the disasters people had predicted. Margaret Chen turned out to be a great HOA president. She ran the organization efficiently and fairly, without the petty tyranny Brenda had practiced. The new board members she recruited were reasonable people who understood that their job was to maintain common areas and enforce reasonable standards, not to control everyone's lives. Brenda Cartwright moved away in early 2027, unable to face her neighbors after the conviction. I heard she relocated to Arizona. I didn't particularly care where she went, as long as she was gone. By the summer of 2027, I'd received over $2 million in royalty payments. I quit my job at the geology firm and became a consultant, working on projects that interested me rather than dealing with corporate bureaucracy. I traveled to New Zealand, to Iceland, to Patagonia, studying volcanic formations and mineral deposits in some of the most beautiful places on Earth. The drilling continued, a steady operation that would run for years, quietly extracting the minerals beneath Pleasant Valley estates, while the residents above went about their daily lives. Some mornings I'd sit on my porch with coffee and watch the sun rise over Pikes Peak, listening to the distant hum of the drill rig, and think about how strange life was. I'd bought mineral rights on a whim, a side investment that I'd hoped might pay off someday. I never imagined it would lead to battles with the HOA, arrests, trials, and eventually financial independence. But that's exactly what happened. The lithium we extracted went into batteries for electric vehicles, helping power the transition to renewable energy. The rare earth minerals went into electronics, medical devices, and green technology. What we were doing beneath that suburban subdivision mattered. It was contributing to something important. And I'd done it all legally, properly, following every rule and regulation. That was the part that still amazed me. Brenda Cartwright had tried everything to stop me. Harassment, frivolous lawsuits, manufactured claims, even inciting sabotage, and she'd failed every time because the law was on my side. In August 2027, Jerry Chen called me with an update. "Lucas, I wanted you to know that we've completed a full survey of the deposit. Based on what we're seeing, this operation is going to run for at least 12 years, possibly 15. You're looking at total royalty payments in the neighborhood of $18 to $20 million. $20 million. I'd gone from a comfortable middle-class life to genuine wealth because I'd taken a calculated risk and stood my ground when people tried to bully me out of it. Thanks, Jerry. Keep up the good work." I hung up and looked around my house, the same modest ranch where this had all started. I could afford a mansion now, could move anywhere I wanted, but I liked it here. I liked my porch with the view of the mountains. I liked Ray next door and the other neighbors who'd been decent through everything. I liked proving that you could win by following the rules and standing up for your rights. Pleasant Valley Estates had learned a valuable lesson. You can't bully someone out of their legal property rights just because you don't like what they're doing. You can't harass, intimidate, or threaten people into submission when the law is on their side. And you definitely can't conspire to sabotage their operations without facing serious consequences. Brenda Cartwright had learned that lesson the hard way. So had the neighbors who'd joined her crusade. And so had the HOA itself, which was now run properly and fairly under Margaret's leadership. As for me, I learned that standing up for yourself is worth it, even when it's hard, even when everyone seems against you, even when it feels overwhelming. I learned that preparation and patience pay off. And I learned that sometimes a $45,000 investment in mineral rights can change your entire life. The The drill rig continued its steady work in my backyard, pulling lithium and rare earth minerals from deep beneath Pleasant Valley estates, turning rock into wealth, one load at a time. And every quarter, when that royalty check arrived, I'd think back to that Tuesday morning in June when the permit approval letter had arrived, starting this whole crazy journey. I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat.